Hello everyone, this is Ron from High Tech Legion, and this is part of a review of the ASUS Rampage IV Formula motherboard, and this is the Republic of Gamers version of the UEFI BIOS, hence the red color theme instead of the blue that we see in the segment motherboards that ASUS has released, which features the UEFI BIOS. Also, it starts in the advanced mode, unlike the easy mode default that the segment boards have. And these are actually the optimized defaults loaded right now. See the features there. It starts with the Extreme Tweaker, where you can see the LN2 mode is grayed out. This option right here is enabled or disabled on board. It's on the through a jumper on the BIOS itself, on the motherboard itself. So that will be grayed out if the jumper is in the default position. And here we have here in yellow are the current values for the CPU turbo speed and the target DRAM speed, which are the default values. Since we have an i7-3960X, it's running at 3900 MHz with turbo. And here are a couple of options. You have the load normal OC profile, load gamers OC profile, load extreme OC profile for with low current, and another one with a high current. Now I don't recommend enabling any of the extreme OC profile, since this typically is aimed for those who are overclocking under LN2 or those extreme overclocking setups. So if you have an air clocking, because that will, especially the high current one, I believe 1.6 or a lot, the current is a lot higher than what you would you would typically put in your standard air cooled X79 overclock. And in the next option, you got the AI overclock tuner. This is actually the same as the segment boards. You have auto, which is default, manual. Here you can adjust the BCLK frequency, CPU strap, clock full reset, or the XMP. So you can quickly load the profile here. Unlike the older UEFI of the segment boards, the profile is automatically loaded. Whatever the first profile is on your DDR3 that you have installed, it's automatic. You can see it automatically picked that up. And you have the CPU level up here. These are the automatic overclocking function, depending on your chip, depending on your system you have there. There's some presets for 4.2, 4.12, and 4.01 gigahertz. Just a slight overclock, of course. And even with XMP mode, you can still change the BCLK, the CPU strap, and clock full gen. Let me just use CPU strap. There you have option for 100 megahertz, 125, 166, and 250. You have clock full gen reset. You can enable or disable. Of course, you can enable it for better overclocking. You can disable it to skip system shutdown at when you're adjusting the BCLK frequency. And turbo ratio, you can just auto by all cores or for by per core. You can of course get the higher overclock if you just buy per core. And here, next option, CPU clock gen filter, also helps with overclocking. You can enable, disable, a couple of more options there, and the memory frequency. And you can just, even if you don't want to use the XMP, or if you're using a memory that does not have XMP, an XMP profile, you can just use the memory dividers you have here. You have the several options. Of course, since we loaded the XMP profile, I picked the appropriate 1600 megahertz divider. You have the extreme tweaking, enable or disable for helping in your overclock. EPU power saving modes, disabled by default. And a DRAM timing control, where you can, some more options here. You have these new ones, are of course exclusive on the Republic of Gamers motherboards. You have the load Elpida hyper profile, if you have an Elpida memory chip installed on your RAM, and if your memory uses an Elpida chip. And you have the load tight PSC profile, and load loose PSC profile, and load raw megahertz profile. These are just more options for you to easily load overclock. And when you're overclocking, you don't have enough time. You have plenty of options to load it immediately. And now here is another option that's new. This is called the Rampage tweak. You have automatic, or mode 1 and mode 2. Mode 1 generally helps when you're with memory compatibility, and mode 2 is more for which want to squeeze more overclocking and performance, which and adds stability when you're overclocking your memory. And of course, these are also in the segment version. You have the primary timings here, And the secondary timings. Here in the latency boundary, you can option of near or further, and you can type in auto for automatic loading in here, or you can just type in the values manually. And of course, there's depending on the channel in there, it is listing the recommended or the current settings that you have that it is using. All the way to the bottom, you have more options for latency timing. See what the options are. You get plenty of options, not just automatic, advanced or delay clocks, and of course set it to normal. If you're not an advanced overclocker, of course, I would just recommend leaving everything on auto. And here at the very bottom, just more options for receiver slew and transmitter slew. And let's go back to the Digi Plus power control. That's the next sub-menu here. Of course, Digi Plus first the voltage, the VRM. And you got here, you have the CPU V-Core in the top options. And, oh, sorry, just go back where we were. And of course, here we go. And you have CPU load line calibration in regular, medium, high, ultra high, and extreme. Of course, this you have to adjust this whenever you're overclocking. And CPU current capability, 100 to 180%, or completely disable it. And you also have CPU voltage, manual, and of course, if you set manual, you can have a CPU fixed frequency setting here. The 300 is the default, but it can go as high as 1100 kilohertz, and can do manual frequency step of 50 kilohertz each step. And let's go back to auto, and VRM over temperature protection. You can disable or disable, automatic or disabled. And of course, if you're overclocking, dealing with other cooling, with different cooling options other than air, you wouldn't want to adjust this one. And you also have the CPU power duty control. You have the T probe, which is the thermal balance, and the extreme, which is a current balance. Again, if you have a non-conventional cooling, of course, this is the option for you to adjust. You have the V-Core MOS voltage control. The 7 volt is actually the default value, but you can, of course, set to auto, 6 volt, 6.5, all the way to 10. CPU power phase control, auto, standard, optimized, extreme, and manual adjustment. With manual adjustment, you have to adjust the phase number adjusted by the current step. You have here medium, ultra fast, regular, and you also have the, just back to auto again, and you have the CPU spread spectrum. Enable, of course, to enhance system stability when you're overclocking. And next is the CPU V-Core boot up voltage. Now this you can adjust to help boot up, you get over the first lump when you're overclocking to boot initially. You have additional voltage on initial boot. And the next option is next set is for the CPU VSA. You have the VCCSA load line calibration, VCCSA current capability. Pretty much the same similar options available in the CPU. Of course, the range is a little bit different. You have the 8 phases for the CPU, and now for the VSA you have 3 phases. You got regular, high, and extreme. You have 100 to 140% with the VCCSA current capability. And of course, the default for this range is also 300 for the VCCSA fixed frequency. And you also have the CPU VCCSA boot up voltage to help that get that initial slump on boot up. And your next is CPU VTT. You can adjust the CPU switching frequency 1x to 1.3x. And CPU VTT over current protection, enable, disable, or automatic. And the last few ones here, large chunk here, the set of the Digi Plus power control estimate is related to the DRAM voltage. You have 2 plus 2 phases here for DRAM current capability for the channel AB and channel CD, and you got 100 to 140% auto or manual voltage control. For voltage frequency, rather, you have the fixed frequency mode. It's actually set to 350 instead of 300, and you have the power phase. You can optimized or extreme. If you want more for stability, I would suggest optimized when you're overclocking, and if you require that, especially if you have something higher than 1600 megahertz for memory. And other option, of course, the same three options for the channel CD as it is in the channel AB here on the top. And next is the PCH 1.1 switching frequency. You can adjust the same switching frequency as the VTT with auto 1x or 1.3x. And let's go back. CPU performance settings is where you adjust the CPU ratio. The Intel speed step technology, or disable for more stability when you're overclocking, or just like leave it enabled, or turbo mode. Of course, you need to enable that when you're overclocking. Now the power limit control here is set to automatically by default, but once you set it to enable, you can see that you have more options there for your long duration power limit, long duration maintained, short duration power limit, additional turbo voltage, and CPU core current limit. Again, these are for more advanced overclockers. So I wouldn't sweat it if you're just overclocking with a regular air cooling. And the last submenu here is the GPU DIMM post. Of course, this is, if I recall correctly, this is exclusive also to the Republic of Gamers motherboard. You have a GPU post here. It shows you what you have currently running. I have two NVIDIA GTX 580s, Matrix GTX 580 Platinum in SLI currently, and it's running. I have it in the first PCIe slot and the third PCIe slot. They're all running and 16x native. And also, you can, if you install another one there in the middle, it will detect it automatically. And here at the bottom is a submenu. It says PCIe LAN simulator. You can load it. You can see there. It even includes, not just for the graphics slots, you got the PCIe X1 slots as well, and they're numbered for your convenience. And the next one is the GPU DIMM post. It shows you what you got installed as well. And it's currently, since I loaded the defaults, my 1600 MHz memory XMP loaded, it's not loaded, so it's reading it as 1333 MHz on all four of the memory DIMM slots. And let's see, let's continue on with the next options here. In the Extreme Tweaker, you got the Extreme OV. There's another option for over voltage. Of course, you want to enable that if you are, again, extremely overclocking. But of course, the temperature, you have to keep it in mind. So I wouldn't recommend that if you have just a standard air cooling. And you also have the BCLK SKU, just auto, or you can reduce to improve a base clock margin, or reduce when CPU is colder. And you have the CPU V-core voltage. You have the manual mode or offset mode. Of course, offset is plus or minus, but the manual mode is the default. And then with manual mode gives you the option of automatic. You can just type auto for automatic, or you can just increase the V-core here when you're overclocking to help with your stability. And you have the VTT CPU voltage, second VTT CPU voltage, CPU VCC SA voltage. Again, similar to the CPU, you have the manual mode or offset mode. Or you can type the automatic or manual adjustment here, or just press the up and down button, the plus and minus button for increasing or decreasing value. And the next voltages are the DRAM voltage. You got channel A, channel B, and channel C and channel D here. And I put in 1.5 volt by default. Let's try to load the XMP. Actually, I have the XMP profile loaded, although the GPU DIMM post didn't update because it requires a reset of the BIOS. That's why it wasn't reading at 1600 MHz. So right now I have the XMP loaded, and I have the DRAM voltage 1.5 loaded, CPU PLL voltage, PCH 1.1 voltage, VTT DDR, and the same for channel A, channel B, channel C, and channel D, CPU spread spectrum, and PCIe spread spectrum. And now this is CPU Tweaker's Paradise. Of course, tweaking refers to overclocking, rather than something like Riverside, California. Not that kind of tweaking. You have here you have more advanced overclocking options or performance tuning options. You have the PCIe CLK SKU, CPU IO SKU, CPU IO SKU, CPU IO drive strength. You can adjust here from these. Of course, the values range from -1 to -63, or +1 to +63. These also are, of course, for advanced LN2 overclockers, or there you go. And the next one is for adjusting. That was for CPU. This is for the memory, where you can adjust the same the frequency SKU. And here you can adjust from -1 to -26, or +1 to +32 for each of these values. or other than here in the bottom. Those are for the signals, but for the DRAM, these actually are the reference voltage, and you can increase it. The minimum is 0.3950x to 0.6300, and same option. You got plus and minus sign to reduce or increase, or manually type it. Now the standard values for these are 0.5, and it raises an increment of 0.005. Next option is the PCH chipset tweakers paradise. So CPU memory and the PCH chipset. You can adjust the PCH 1.5 volt voltage, PCH 1.1 VG. You have the DMI strength, DMI skew, USB, and SATA 3. Again, these are more advanced options. That's why they're nested here. The nested options are right at the very bottom. These are for more advanced overclockers. So if you're just you're running your air cooling, they're not really necessary to be tweaked. And let's finish this tab here and let's move on to the main tab. Of course, this UEFI, you can just use your mouse. And we have here the BIOS information, BIOS version. You have pretty much the same layout as the segment board. And you have the system date and system time, and security, which is a sub-menu at the bottom here. You can click, you can put in administrator password and put in user passwords. And also here on the menu, it mentions the iROG 1 version. This is also, of course, for Republic of Gamers board. And it also shows the BIOS version you have installed and the build date. Now the next tab here, also before I forget, the option here is system language. You can adjust it. And of course the English is the default one. And next tab is the advanced tab. This more refers to the features, but you might see some redundant options here that you saw in the previous tab, the Extreme Tweaker tab, the CPU configuration, where you can enable or disable these other functions for the CPU. And at the top there's some grayed out values there. These are actually, of course, related to the CPU depending on what you have installed. So it's displaying the values for my i7-3960X CPU right now. And right here at the bottom, you have your options that you can enable or disable. You have the Intel Adaptive Thermal Monitor, Intel Hyper-Threading, again, enable or disable. Active processor cores, you can adjust because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or all cores. And limit CPU ID maximum, execute disable bit, hardware prefetcher, adjacent cache line prefetch, Intel VT, and CPU power management configuration. This is a nested option. This is what you want to, if you're overclocking, whether it is extreme overclocking or just standard air cooling, you would want to check in this submenu and disable. Of course, these C states here, we can disable them or enable them automatically by default. They're turned on, but the value is actually set to auto. So you can disable the C1E, C3, C6, and C7. And a turbo mode, again, as you saw in the Extreme Tweaker, you also have the option of enabling or disabling it under this menu. You also have the enhanced Intel speed step. It's enabled by default, as well as turbo mode, and you can adjust the CPU ratio in here as well. So let's go back and go back one more level. Here you go. The next option is the system agent configuration, where you can adjust the PCIe. Sorry, let me just move the camera again. CPU IE X16 link speed, and the CPU, rather the PCIe X16 link speed. The default, they're Gen 3 for PCIe X3, PCIe 3.0, and you can adjust it to Gen 1, Gen 2, or Gen 3. Of course, the default is Gen 3 for all of them, including the X8, the X16, and all three of that option right there. And let's go back up again. The next option is the PCH information, where you can only have a single option. You have the high precision timer. It's enabled by default, or you can disable it. You have this high precision event timer, and you got the CPU SATA configuration. It's actually AHCI mode by default, and you have the smart SATA checks enabled by default as well. But what's not enabled by default is the hot plug function. If you have a SATA 6 G1, G2 refers to the Intel chipset SATA 6. Then you have these Intel SATA 3s, SATA 3, G1, G2, G3, 4, and actually it doesn't show the SATA 6G. That is the ASM 1061 chipset. So maybe if I plug in something, it will show up in there. But right now, seeing what I have plugged in, it only shows the SATA on the Intel SATA ports. So, and the next tab is the USB configuration. You have the legacy USB support and mass storage device. I got a USB thumb drive installed, so it's detecting that right now. And also, let me just go back there. You have the USB device, you have the drive, keyboard, mouse, and 2 hubs. It's detecting that. And onboard device configuration. You can enable or disable the audio. Front panel type SPDIF, Intel LAN controller, Intel LAN optional ROM, enable or disabled. You got the ASMedia USB 3.0 control, the ASMedia 1042 USB 3.0 controller, battery charging support, disabled by default, or you can enable that. You have the ASM 1061, actually here is the option. I mentioned earlier the ASM 1061 for the additional SATA 6 ports, a pair of SATA 6 ports, your ACI mode, and they're enabled by default. Let's go back. And next, the last one is the APM, or Advanced Power Management. You got the Store AC Power Loss, Power Off by default. Most of these are actually disabled by default. In fact, all of them, Power On by PS2 keyboard, Power On by PS2 mouse, Power On by PCIe, Power On by RTC, and ERP Ready is disabled by default. This allows BIOS to switch off some power this at S5 to get the system ready for ERP system requirement when let's go back. Of course, the next tab is the Monitor tab. The Monitor tab is, you have here the anti-surge support. At the very top, you have the enable or disabled. I would recommend if you're overclocking, even if you're just air cooling, standard air cooling, you can disable this one. So you have more stats to help with the stability. And then you have the voltage monitor. These are sub-menu. You can read the voltages, current voltage right now. You have the temperature monitor. You have the CPU, motherboard, PCH, and optional temperatures. And the fan speed monitor. And the next one is the fan speed control. They actually separate the fan speed monitor and the fan speed control, so you don't have to scroll too far up, too far down. See there, you have the. I only have the one CPU fan installed and one Q fan installed. I'm using the fan controller on the on my case itself, so I don't have anything plugged in the optional fans. But let me just demonstrate that once again, because this is a feature that is not available in other. Not available in other non-ASUS motherboards. You have the this is the default 600 RPM. This is the CPU fan speed low limit. Well, it will give you a CPU error, fan speed error if it's lower than 600 RPM. So if you have one of those really those coolers like the Noctua NHD14 that runs at a lower RPM and boot up, I would recommend to lower this value. The NHD14 is really quiet. It runs actually. I had to set it to 300 or 200 RPM just so it would get past booting, because it will think that the fan was not spinning because it's spinning too low. But it is a good functionality to have just to safeguard ensure that your CPU fan is running. And you have the option here, the turbo by default, since it is an enthusiast platform. The CPU fan profile is not standard. It is actually turbo by default, but you have the option of standard, silent, or manual. See the manual here, you can adjust the CPU upper temperature, CPU fan max duty cycle in percent, the CPU lower temperature, and CPU minimum duty cycle in percent. Now this is not only, of course, exclusive to the CPU fan manual setting, but you can also adjust each of these optional fan 1 control, fan 2 control, fan 3, and chassis fan and Q fan control with the same option. And the next tab is related to the boot options. Here you have the boot up numlock state and on, full screen logo, enable, disable, wait for F1 if error, enabled, force BIOS as enabled in the option raw messages, setup mode in advanced BIOS. If, as mentioned earlier, this is an advanced enthusiast platform, it starts in advanced mode, or you can just set it to easy mode by default, as in what you saw in the segment motherboards. And you have the boot option priorities. You have boot option 1 and boot option 2. See there, it's detecting my USB drive as including it, and I have the my SSD drive is my current boot drive. And you can adjust that hard drive BBS priorities, where you can set, if you have a hard drive like this one where I have my games installed, you can set that to the higher priority than what you have that for your SSD. You can change that and it will reflect that in there. So I like that option that it shows you which port it is plugged in. So if you have multiple drives that have the same name, essentially you can kind of tell which is plugged into which port, so you don't get confused. Or you have a quick option here at the bottom for boot override. You just simply click on which drive you want to boot immediately. So the moment you click any of these, it will start booting immediately. We'll start exit this advanced mode window and we'll start booting immediately. So I would suggest just clicking any of that once you are ready to actually boot into that drive. And the final tab we have here is the tool tab, where you can, first option is enable or disable the Supreme FX3 lighting LED. There's a very cool looking LED light on the sound area of the Rampage IV Formula motherboard. So that's a really red light, layout. It looks really cool, but you can, if you hate LED for some reason, you can disable it here, as they just provide an option for you. And other options here for it comes in really handy. You have the Easy Flash 2 utility for flashing your BIOS if you don't want to use the BIOS flashback that you have here at the bottom. ASUS SPD information just basically reads the XMP or JDAC information that you have installed, and as you can see, it tells you if the memory you have supports XMP 1.3 as the Rampage IV Extreme, Rampage IV Formula, and even Extreme supports the XMP 1.3. And you have here, you have the frequency values and command rate and other values that are loaded in the XMP profile. And you have the ASUS OC profile, where you can store your overclocking profiles here, up to 8 per BIOS chip. And there are 2 BIOS chips that you can switch between 2 of them on the Rampage IV Formula. So this is what I have installed. I have a 5 GHz profile here and a 4 GHz profile. And of course, the label tab, you can type in the name, save profile, and you can just type in which of the banks, one of the 8 banks you want to use, want to load or save to. Just type it in there. Same with the save and the load profile here at the bottom. That's what you want to, and then press enter to just immediately load it. And you have the BIOS flashback feature, force BIOS to boot, and copy BIOS 1 to BIOS 2. Just additional options in the BIOS flashback feature that were not in the segment board, as at least I can remember. And here is the go button file. There is the mem-OK button is actually now called the go button file, and it's essentially not only does it do the function that the old mem-OK button performs, but what it also does is it quickly loads overclocking values that you want to put in. Right now, since I didn't set it, most of these values are in default. Actually, all of them are in an auto. So you can just load a value here, or type in a value, load from EEPROM setting here at the bottom, or save from above setting to load default. Or you can just manually put in each of these voltage options when you're overclocking. So when your motherboard is on a test bench, you can just quickly press that button, and for example, if you don't want to proceed to multiple steps, you just quickly press that, and you're already, I'd say, on 4.5. You start with 4.6 gigahertz, and then move on from there. So if you have a chip that's guaranteed to boot at 4.6 or 4.8, just quickly load your 4.8 gigahertz profile and just quickly start tweaking from there. So it's a very, very useful feature, especially for extreme overclockers. And let me just try the easy mode just to quickly show you what it looks like. Here, the exit button. There's some more options here. You have of course, the general health F1, previous values F2, shortcut F3, optimize default F5, F6 for the ASUS ratio boost, F10 to save, escape to exit, and F12 to print screen. So you can maybe show your friends, or just if you want to look at it through Windows, just take a screenshot of your extreme tweaker values. Of course, you have to have a FAT32 or FAT16 formatted USB drive plugged into one of the USB 2.0 ports to be able to use that function. So let's press exit here and go to easy mode. Just do let me just save changes. Actually, load optimized defaults and easy mode. Here we go. It looks similar to the segment board, but of course it carries the Republic of Gamers color theme, and it has the Republic of Gamers logo on the upper left hand side. So here we go. You have the temperature, voltage, fan speed, and the same preset for system performance here, quiet performance and energy saving. You're giving the options to do that, and you have multilingual options as well: English, French, Spanish, Dutch, Russian, traditional Chinese, Japanese, and simplified Chinese. And you also have the boot priority shortcut here at the bottom. And let's go back to the advanced mode. See, make sure that we didn't miss any option here we got. And that pretty much covers it. And thanks for watching. And you can read the rest of the review at www.hightechlegion.com or subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/hightechlegion to see the rest of our review and our to see other motherboard reviews that we have. Thanks for watching and bye.